I now would like to call on Eric Ruth from Argentina, from ImiBio in Misiones in Argentina. Eric, do you hear me? And he is.
I do hear you.
Yes, yes. And this afternoon, he is acting as the presence.
In Iguazu, that's perfect. That's so. Yeah, Misiones. Perfect. My grandchildren were there last week. That's for you to know. Wow. Almost eaten by monkeys.
So you're very welcome, Eric. You're very welcome. So
thank you.
Cambodia,
and so please. Maybe we switch gears from Cambodia to Iguazu and Misiones. And what you see behind me is a picture of the waterfalls. And I will share my presentation with you, which is essentially turning around 3 axes, which is what is Misiones, and one is ImiBio, what is ImiBio, and the third one is what do we want to do and how do we recommend that? What are our recommendations? So share screen. Oh, here we are. So do you see the screen, the shared screen? Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So, first of all, I would like to forward the excuses by our president, who is Viviana Rovira, and she is the president of Instituto Misionero de Biodiversidad, and she had a duty she could not avoid, so she sends her greetings. So, what is Misiones? Misiones is a province in Argentina, a small province, which is a biodiversity hotspot. And that's due to the fact that it contains the biggest remnant of the inner Atlantic forest. It is surrounded, and to a lesser extent, it's connected to the rest of Argentina by a small border, 10% of its circumference to the province of Corrientes. It contains approximately 1% of the continental surface, which corresponds to 30,000 square kilometers by 50% with native forests. And that makes for 52% of Argentina's biodiversity. I'm sorry, and Argentina's, it has been called Argentina's biodiversity capital by the National Parliament in 2018. And you see at the right some pictures, the falls, and you see the arborescent ferns that makes you believe that you are in the Jurassic era. How has the Great Atlantic Forest evolved? The Great Atlantic Forest, the inner Atlantic Forest, has suffered a deforestation, which makes other deforestations and fires to pale in comparison, because by 2000, year 2000, only 5% of the 80 million hectares remained. So what you see here on the graph, on the maps, is that 1900, the extension, 1900 of the inner Atlantic forest, and you follow to 40 and the 70s, and year 2000, you see almost the entire inner Atlantic forest has gone, and what remains essentially in this province of Misiones. The province has protected the Paraná forest, as we call it, by a legal network of 120 laws. So I noted that you mentioned regulations and laws, and that is something which started in 1974 in the province. Now, this protection has a cost. There is no soybean agriculture. What you saw from the previous slide here is surrounded by Paraguay and Brazil. All that is soybean culture, and Misiones is the greenest spot on the Google Earth map. So on a 20-year period, there is a loss of 9 billion US dollars. So, and you also have the cost of lost opportunities. As a matter of comparison, you can say Misiones preserves 48% of its nature, whereas in the average in the world is 12%. So now, ImiBio. What is ImiBio? ImiBio is a provincial institute for biodiversity, which has been inaugurated in 2018. It focuses on conservation, restoration of biodiversity, enhance the holistic value of biodiversity and ecosystem services on a regional aspect. It studies the biodiversity within the Paraná Forest or the Inner Atlantic Forest regionally, and promotes biodiversity policies and legal instruments. And it also identifies and responds to societal needs. We work along 4 axes, which is biodiversity and science, biodiversity and health, biodiversity and society, and we are also managing the genetic resources according to the Nagoya Protocol. So in terms of biodiversity and science, you could say this is a bag where we can do anything we want, but that is the place where we do the monitoring and the studying of the biodiversity, where we do the biobanking, where we do the sequencing, and so on. Health, that concerns a holistic view of the biodiversity, which goes from the microbes in the earth to the mammals, to the trees, and to the humans. So we consider not only as a term of health, we don't consider only the humans, but the ecosystems and nature as a whole. And biodiversity and society, that goes as a transfer of our knowledge into communities where we share our specific knowledge, in this case, fruits, native fruits, how to produce them and how to exploit them, and also setting up mushroom cultures for local house use or commercial use. So what happens now? So now we have seen what ImiBio is. So ImiBio's vision is to combine isolated, local, regional. In regional, I mean the tri-national area because we are close to Paraguay and Brazil, so it would be tri-national, and Latin American efforts in a synergistic interaction, creating a game changer for protection, conservation, and restoration of biodiversity. So ImiBio proposes to act for biodiversity through regional and continental networking in the monitoring and study of biodiversity. Strategic partnering would be such an action with such organization as LifeWatch ERIC. And I think this is particularly appropriate because ImiBio is being built now, so it's constructed, and we are flexible in our approaches and can still be bent to different objectives. Network, the use of advanced and costly technologies like remote sensing, sharing of these data, create networks of biodiversity biobanks. We are having a large view on biobanks. So we will biobank not only humans, but we will biobank anything in the biodiversity, following the most rigorous rules coming from the human biobanking systems. Share appropriate infrastructures over the continent for a better resource utilization, store and share detailed sample data. So build data banks with sample data that is similar to what you see in the human biobanks. So I'm sorry, I'm using human biobanks as a model because they are very detailed. Detailed molecular characterizations of biodiversity and build a biodiversity molecular database. We look for building international collaboration to strengthen biodiversity policies and legal instruments. And that comes back to the discussion you just had. We have a team that is a legal team in ImiBio that works specifically on the Nagoya protocols, but not only that, but also is very well versed in the protection of biodiversity. So we will look forward to build a network of reference and resource centers in Latin America and the continent, and interact and support indigenous knowledge, because Misiones is essentially an indigenous province where you have the Guaranis. If you have seen the mission, the film The Mission with Robert De Niro, then you will see that it's really an indigenous area. And we have, for example, in Paraguay, they have two languages, official languages. One is Spanish and the other one is Guarani. So that was my last slide, and I hope I didn't take my time, so I hope I haven't overstepped too much. And thank you for your interest, questions, and you see the ImiBio team last year's SUNGA76.
Enrique, thank you. Thank you very much. Very, very, very informative. The only detail which I'd like to add is the need for us to continue to work together to advance a very strong science agenda for the Summit of the Future / UNGA78, and this is a very urgent process for many of the reasons you have outlined today. So thank you, and also thank you for your creativity, commitment, imagination, and hard work, and as a co-chair for the Science Summit at UNGA77, and I think in particular for enabling and animating the research in Latin America, which you have done to tremendous effect. So thank you indeed. Now I would like to turn to Fernando Amestoy Rosso. Fernando, do you hear me? We can see you.
Yes, clear, Declan.
Yeah. The screen is yours.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you, LifeWatch, for the invitation and the opportunity of sharing this session with you. I try to add. I think that Juan, me, and Eric have made very good summaries of recommendation. I will try to complement their appreciations. I think that the recommendations come emerge from the problems that have been pointed out by all the speakers. Mainly the the scale, the spatial, the geographic scale, I think that biodiversity problems has a global dimension. Because of that, they are conformed by the problematic of countries with very heterogeneous socioeconomic conditions and difference in the economic stage of development. Because of that, there are different priorities and in the political agendas and different needs to attend this problem. There are also connection failures, perceived connection failures between the problems and solutions many times in this time. The problem to convert data into knowledge and to transform this knowledge into value, environmental value, social value, and also value in the market. Economic. There are some challenges in organizational model to be attended because, as it was commented, we are passing from centralized research infrastructure system to distributed infrastructure systems, and that's need to me to make well innovation in organizational model because of improved connectivity, improve the exchange of information mechanisms. That's work with open science. Open science need to be promoted and is promoted in the European Commission and also need to be promoted at Latin American level. But many advancement, science advancements like ICTs, big data, IoT, AI, well, it helps a lot to promote open science, but there are still some challenges in sharing metadata, in the quality of data that the different institutions have, the standards that they are used, and to grant access to this data. That's in different countries we have different problems with that. There are challenges to overcome this problem. There is also a challenge in attend biodiversity framed in the local and regional regulations because of the difference between countries. So there's a problem with the use of data. The protection of data has a political dimension also. The previous speakers talk about the use, and it's very common to use models from bottom up to promote bottom up work and the excellence of research system. But it's also a need, an urgency of promote top down mechanisms involving policymakers also, and that because they need to prioritize biodiversity themes in the ASEAN. All the problems have multidisciplinary approaches and multicultural dimensions, also multicultural dimension. Climate change, biodiversity, environment, regulation, cultural heritage are all topics and problems that are closely related. There is a need also to have a triple helix approach to involve private sector, industry, government, and academy, because this problem has multidimensional also perspective. And we are talking in the agenda, we are talking about our ecology, blue economy, green ecology, green economy, well, circular economy. Many of these things are focused on sustainability, and the involvement of this triple helix approach, private sector, government, and academy. Finally, there's a need to show success stories and to put this theme in the political agenda, and of course, in the funding these biodiversity topics. The question is if these biodiversity urgencies are enough positions in the agenda of the multilateral credit organization, if there is enough funding for these problems, and if they are prioritized. I think that's the recommendation is to overcome this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernando. Thank you so much for those valuable insights. Now I would like to welcome Bamidele, Ademola-Olateju from
Declan. If I may, just to complement what he said,
Yes.
Officially, we are going to establish a LifeWatch ERIC, it's on the way, office there in Pando, Tecnológico Parque, in Uruguay, Montevideo, in order to foster green innovation under the explicit request of the government of Uruguay, as well inside within the EUCELAC cooperation framework received from project. Not only the pilot, but one of the pilot is how to from there, and then also a triangle composite of by Uruguay, Costa Rica, and Colombia to foster this bioeconomic process. And these three facilities or offices. As our successful, we said that in our successful meeting held last July there in Uruguay. So that's the official announcement, just to complement, and that's the reason is here as well, because from the beginning, they have been supporting all this process from that and great things ahead from the point of view of innovations by economy.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And that's a good model for Ondo State to follow as well. Africa, yeah. So, and I'd just like to recognize Dr. Prince Jose. A lot of the colleagues yesterday participated at the AIMS session, and Dr. Prince is the chairman of AIMS, isn't that correct? Yeah, you're most welcome. Delighted you could join us today. We'll ask you to make some comments in a couple of moments. So in the meantime, now, as I mentioned, I would like to welcome Bamidele, who has already intervened a number of times very eloquently today, and again the opportunity to understand recommendations that she is going to make. I think will help us in our path forward in an inclusive way and in a way which allows us to look forward to the Summit of the Future and indeed COP15 in a spirit of togetherness and inclusion. So Bamidele, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Declan. Before I go to the recommendations, let me quickly present our own case, my case for Ondo State, because Africa, Nigeria, Ondo State in that order has seen 65% decline in biodiversity between 1970 and now. And the big threats we face in Ondo State and indeed in Nigeria is that we have serious changes in land and ocean use. In my state of Ondo, entire towns have been wiped off, like the Ayetoro town in Ondo State. And we are seeing increasing overexploitation of forest resources as well as declining species. We see how climate change is changing our perception of farming systems. For example, in Western Nigeria, where I come from, in August before, in the early 70s to the early 90s, in August, we do have 2 weeks of break in rainfall. That now is changing dramatically. We no longer have the August break that we are used to. And we have challenges due to pollution because of, that is our blame, relatively low infrastructure in energy production. So we are more reliant on generators, and that is threatening. Each time I turn on CNN, I see Copernicus and I see the air pollution index, and sometimes Lagos is really bad. So the challenges of Ondo State is that of ocean surge, is that of extinction of plant and animal species, depletion of underground aquifers, I haven't heard much of that today. We are tapping into underground aquifers like never before. Are these replaceable? Are these sustainable? We all know what the answers are. And we have unsustainable land use that I would like to bring to global attention. For example, my governor has decreed that anybody acquiring land can no longer bury their dead in houses, because before, up till now, we bury our dead in our homes, and that's not good land use. I've had Dr. Pimkar talk extensively about indigenous knowledges, and I'm very interested in that because in Nigeria, our indigenous knowledges is getting lost. So we need quick intervention. We need a lot of work on documentation of these indigenous knowledges. So going now to recommendations, I want to say that we have a reservoir of indigenous knowledges that must be documented, because it is this indigenous knowledges that has prevented tragedy of commons in Africa, where everybody takes a social resource at the same time, leading to its total destruction. Then, most importantly, we need funding. And I'm not going to be shy about that. Please, GBIF, help. We are looking forward to collaboration with LifeWatch Eric. I joked the other time that it should have been LifeWatch Erica. So you put Africa somewhere in that name. So we need funding, we need engagement, and we need cooperation. So our cooperation often, you will know that it often happens at the national level. So now we need for it to come down, to percolate through the layers, we need some level of modularity and granularity. Please start considering how to engage subnationals, because we know where the shoe pinches. Nigeria is large, 200 million people. When you just stay at the national level, we don't feel anything down there. And I must say, as part of the recommendations, awareness in the developing world and emerging economies is different from what you have here. I have lived in the United States before I was appointed. I have lived here for 26 years. So I know, I see hypermodernity and other development in a single breath. So I see both worlds and I live it. So before this appointment, I was living in Atlanta. My family still stays in Atlanta. So I can tell you what happens here and what happens there. Please, awareness needs to happen to bridge the gap. And like the minister from Cambodia said, when we see what is happening at the Amazon basin, when we see what is happening in the Congo, monocropping is not biodiversity. Monocropping is a problem. So you need to begin to talk to head of governments that monocropping it doesn't promote diversity. There must be some kind of, we must find a way so that we just don't plant oil palm, plant only cocoa, plantain, rubber. It can give the cover and the illusion of preserving forest, but it does not promote the kind of ecosystem that caters to all species that we have driven away by planting those monocrops. Then I subscribe to the concept of community ownership. He mentioned it. When the community owns a process, it's different. They begin to see it as their own, unlike someone coming to say, okay, this, they don't believe in it. And that's why I think awareness is very important. And awareness does not even cost big money. It's just dissemination of information. So those are the observations I made while attending this plenary. I have been enriched by the various speakers. I thank Declan for inviting me to this session. I thank the opportunity of this LifeWatch Eric platform, and I look forward to great cooperation with GBIF and other bodies that Declan might wish to introduce on those states. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And
Christos, I'm touched by your warm words and the sincerity in your talking. And I must tell you that through our connections from the Spanish presidency this year, we started to collaborate with the Sahel Coalition, and we tried to develop a common roadmap. You know that these processes take a long time to develop and be implemented at the end. But of course, the window of opportunity and collaboration is obviously open from our side, from LifeWatch Eric. As I specifically said in my intervention today, early on in the morning, one of the expected impacts of our platform and our efforts is the inclusiveness. So the people from all over the world, without paying anything, are just a few clicks away, you know, from the data, from the services, from whatever exists in our premises and in our facilities. And of course, we are open, you know, to develop any kind of training, education. Our CTO insisted on the capacity building. These are the kind of things we need to start from. And definitely, there's a lot of opportunity through LifeWatch to develop, you know, per se, projects in order to collaborate with the scientists and the local populations, the stakeholders of your country. And I'm looking forward, actually, to have this opportunity, to see this opportunity flourishing in the near future.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
And if I could just insert some how to implement the recommendations. Recommendations is one thing, but how do you then do them? Two things I would like to suggest. One is that we involve Ondo State in the process, which will result in the research infrastructure calls for proposals in the Horizon Europe 2023 work package, which will publish calls on the 1st of April next year. And that's just a very practical day job activity. And that raises the prospect then of involving in a practical way cooperation with LifeWatch, but also potentially a funded mechanism as well. The second point then is regarding NDICI, which is the European Union development program for Africa. It's a longer story, but in summary, the NDICI program provides funding on a non-competitive basis, and you don't apply for it. If governments request it according to some heads of priorities, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we should have also, and this is a related process, I think we can do the one job and we can have two benefits from it, is then to go forward at a political level to advance an application for NDICI funding for a cooperation mechanism for a capacity in Ondo State under this project with the support. I mean, it's your, the money will be yours and the leadership will be yours. But of course, we're global here, and I think that will be a hugely important exercise. And then we need to maintain the dialogue to ensure that when we advance towards the Summit of the Future and COP15, that it's an integrated process. And you talk about access to money. Absolutely, absolutely. However, I don't think money is the issue. I think the policy basis that prioritizes what you need, that's the bit that's missing in Europe. For example, the European Union had a summit earlier this year and all the African leaders came, you know, Europe loved it. Why? They didn't ask for anything. They didn't ask for anything. The European Union has adopted legislation, had already adopted legislation of the NDICI. The commitment is there of 100 billion euros before the Africa Summit, and none of the African leaders had any proposals. Look at this. Look at the conclusions. So yes, you need money, and don't be shy about it. Yeah, but it's not just understanding that as a reality. It's then okay. Don't think about applying for funding. Think about then advancing the policy dialogue, and that's the bit that's missing. Is a policy dialogue, and I think one thing we can all learn from LifeWatch Eric, of course, it does what we've heard today, and we've heard also, but I just like to emphasize that LifeWatch Eric is actually a mechanism for the European Union to implement its broad biodiversity political agenda. I'm not saying policy, I'm saying political agenda, of course, policy. That's something you have to be collaborative here, but that's something I think you can borrow from. And it's all about telling Europe what you love about Europe, and adopt all this stuff. Tell them what they want to hear, and then that increases certainly in the context of the NDICI funding.
Thank you.
To do with it, if you want to respond, but that's because you raised two issues in which I've had very nice experiences. I don't want to say that. For example, when dealing with Native American different tribes, the Mississinapi, the Ojibwe, the Shenanigans, actually, since the elder people were starting to have, and many of them actually had, they speak perfect English, actually, we decided to go and collect their traditional knowledge by videotaping directly in their own language, so that they could express easily in interviews, etc. Not even addressing that themselves, because they don't like, and they don't want to see, okay, have collective meetings, and then we'll collect that. Nowadays you have that technology. You have to be very careful because that type of documentation might get lost or it might get filtered or whatever, it's not official. But it works so well that they have adopted that, and then it's very easy, for the Southern Cheyenne, which are now in Oklahoma, just they had that, and they perfectly remember exactly the way how to deal with some cattle, and the grass, etc. With all this traditional knowledge in their own livelihoods, actually. So don't think about documenting perhaps in the traditional way of documenting, because writing documents about traditional knowledge is almost impossible, because when they see that in writing, they don't like it, how it is written, and that's the idea. So probably it's a question of collecting it and then working on making sure that reaches where it has to reach through not the simple translation, but the accommodation, so that the language is there by them also done smoothly, perhaps with younger generations. But that's an experience that worked well. And the second experience, actually in Amboseli National Park in Kenya, with Team Lioness and some other places also in Cambodia, actually was women are much better in transmitting knowledge. Of course, women's knowledge, believe me, they are the only ones who know it, because if not, it won't happen. And they have to read their own meetings, and they're secret, and men cannot be there. So see how you handle that. But even traditional knowledge, with this community knowledge, to put it bluntly, the women are more, if they really want to implement their policies, don't rely on men, rely on women, because men will try to do this, that, and ultimately complex. And I'm talking about Team Lioness because they are well known. You know what Team Lioness is, no? The national park, people that survey the national parks that are only women, they don't have rifles or anything, but they get all the illegal trafficking, illegal hunters right away, and they convince them, how come on those, why? What the hell are you doing it? They come into the community, actually, so it's restorative justice in its best, and it's very, very efficient. Actually, they have received many prizes worldwide, and they're very good, actually, and they are, as I say, they are rangers, but they go unarmed, which is a dangerous factor. How to deal with those situations so that they get all the information and convince, etc., for Syke and implement the policy instead of having even armies, in Kenya and some other places against the illegal hunters. Actually, it's very efficient. So think perhaps in empowering women in the process of traditional knowledge, even for knowledge that is simply community knowledge, has nothing to do with women's knowledge per se, especially when it arrives not so much to practices, which also are of essence there. What's the real practice? Because men will pretend that women don't do anything. Actually, they are looking. And if you go to the other ones who are simply looking there, and the ones who are working are really women only. But also in the uses of and the cuisine in the kitchen, the mixture of things that they do for food and for that kind of stuff, they are much better, because there's no way that very possibly man will need to know where it sees a special sesame coming out from a special, totally dry fruit from this part of Africa. What are the components that it has? It can not even be toxic, and you have to combine that in a way with that's cooked, etc. But that's a traditional knowledge of essence, actually, to preserve the multi-crop type of thing. But I'm simply telling you of the experience. I don't want even to evaluate them actually, but they seem to work very well. What I have for myself experience, and it's a subjective impression.
Thank you.
The GBIF might have problems perhaps in recollecting that and putting that in this database. What the hell do I do? Actually, this is not real, but it is true.
I just wanted to speak for a second about the funding. In our work program, as I mentioned about another topic, we're taking a strategic objective pathway for funding, and especially at the national level. We are been in discussions with the Global Environmental Facility, GEF, which of course works with the development banks, to become an implementation partner with them. So what this would mean would be that any activities with the development banks would need to interact with GBIF and have the data put in an open format and shared openly. So any partnerships would help data flow from granting receivers into the global network of funding. So that's something that we're working very closely with Jeff on now, and hopefully what that we hope it will do will give a pathway for countries to enter into the GBIF network. By getting this funding, they will become part of the GBIF network and develop the capacity through our network. We have trainers in Africa that can help train. Omokate, our node manager in Lagos, is a fantastic trainer. So this is one way we're hoping to expand that network, and funding at the national level is by becoming really embedded with the GEF and the Development Bank. So whether that filters down to the state level, I'm not sure, but that's what we can do at this level. So, yeah.
Superb.
So if I can just intervene here and say something about, I don't want to prolong this, having a small institution starting from scratch, so to say, raises the question that we discussed on the Belmont Forum sessions on the funding. How can you create funding for initiatives that are local and regional, like ImiBio? So, of course, I'm talking for my house, but I think it's relevant for other situations as well, which are not only related to ImiBio, but in other areas and other continents. So I think that's something where I think LifeWatch Eric could contribute.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you very much. Now we're almost at the end. I'd like to call on Kristian Meissner from Syke in Finland. Kristian, do you hear me?
Indeed,
No.
indeed I do. Indeed I do, Declan.
And it's very, very late there, so we don't want to.
11.
11.
No, it's past.
Kristian.
It's past midnight here, but I mean, it is worthwhile, and it has been an exciting event, and I'm happy to be here. Just give me a minute, I'll find my screen that I want to share. And now I want to put it into full mode, which is tricky since it brought up some stuff on top of it. Just give me a minute and I'll try to find the right one. No, it's now blocked by other things. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
So can you live with this view, because I'm currently unable to edit it, and I fear that I might drop out of the session entirely if I try to change my view. Can you see the slide, even though it's not in full view at the moment?
We don't.
Not yet.
Oh, you can't. Well, then I need to probably reconnect. So just give me a second. This is unfortunate, but something came up with Zoom here. Just a minute. I'll reconnect. Can you now see something?
Fantastic.
Yeah, great. Okay, and apologies for that. There were some glitches in my technique here. So I work for the Finnish Environment Institute, which is a governmental agency. I've been working a long time for improving monitoring, and I'm absolutely ecstatic being a part of this plenary, also hearing about the talks. And I was really worried getting to the end of it and being the last speaker, so to speak, that you would be having talked about all of it, and I'm happy to say you didn't. So there is still something that I can talk about, and which was the standards for measuring biodiversity with molecular tools. And that many of the very important things have already been brought up. Ward and Joe talked about the importance of open data, metadata standards. Then there was the point that Bamidele made about awareness and inclusion of local communities. Many other speakers made that same point. Transparency was mentioned. Fernando talked about scale and the importance of top-down mechanisms. And I feel this is a bit of an in-between. This is a bit of a need for a top-down mechanism, but it's also having to do with some other stuff. And I hope that it will react now to my scrolling, because at the moment I am in trouble having no view of the cursor on my screen. So let's see. Yes, I have to go to my laptop here. Yes, okay, so standards for biodiversity with molecular tools. You all have heard about the promise of molecular tools, the DNA, eDNA, in biodiversity assessments. They're fast developing. They're almost ready for routine implementation, is what I would say, because there are still some hurdles that we need to take before we are really there. And these hurdles have to do with the problem that there are no fixed minimum method requirements yet available for the use of these methods. And since these are very sensitive methods and can pick up even tiny molecules and thus detect, say, a mammal on a watershed, even in a stream, they're also very prone to error, which makes them susceptible to error, and also then to poor data quality, which we really wouldn't want to have if we want to do exact science and also exact predictions on assessments. So another thing that is a bit of a problem is that we are in this splintered funding mode that makes it really easy to go national, especially when there is stuff really fastly developing. And then people that get grants, they forget that there is an international community. They go into their own corners, do their own thing, and come together after years of work, and then find out that their methods are not really compatible to one another, which is really something that we can't afford at the moment, facing the global biodiversity crisis. There are thus very many funded international projects, but very little exchange of an effort that synthesize the lessons that we have learned. And that means that in essence, and I know that I'm a bit provocative with the statement that data flows from molecular data at the moment are not really comparable, which is a shame, and they should be. I'm going to skip over this here. We're late in the day, but at least to say that this is a bit on why there is a need to, at some point, to deal with standards, because it's then stepping into the arena of wider implementation for operational use, where you need standards to do the job. And we could do a comparison about some things, the cooperation reinforcement on an international levels, the requirements it has, the risks it has, and the strengths and benefits it brings. And this is well, to put it short, you really need to identify a lot of stakeholders if you're going to play it on an international level. And if you are trying to do this as a project, you're likely to fail. So established solutions on how to deal with this would be a real good thing. And fortunately, we have standardization organizations that are used to dealing with this. But there is this risk, and this is a risk that many researchers really dread, is that they have to potentially compromise and to reach consensus, because the researchers really rather use each other's toothbrush than each other's methods. And this is something that is a bit of a problem when there's method development going on. So you have lesser overall control for the individual contributors if you are into international standards. But on the upsides, you really have immediate comparability, and no need for intercalibration, which can take years and years. And we have examples of that in the EU with the Water Framework Directive, which took us intercalibrating 300 or so national different methods to reach water quality status. It took us years to do, and no one really wants to go through these exercises anymore. There is a potential for inclusiveness if you do it correctly. And this is something that I would strongly stress, that in this case, we really need to be very inclusive and not do it in a Eurocentric or Anglo-American speaking on terms there, but on terms that are applicable to less developed nations as well, and that benefit them, because the risk of taking up a method that is not comparable for them is too high, because it's a very expensive one as well. So there needs to be a very little risk involved, and that's where standards come in with minimal criteria. And of course, there's the upside. We could create international markets if we really wanted to. If you go just national, which is now many nations do, you are doing a good job if you're a developed country in your own country, and you may even have regional comparison if you talk to your neighbors a little, but there is not really an overall international comparability. And this is where it gets tricky when we talk about the biodiversity crisis, because we really need that global comparability of the data that is coming in from the biodiversity molecular tool methods. And we would be missing out on this, and this possibility of having this quick comparability all over. But of course, it is a quicker time frame for the individual nations for an uptake of the methods, because they don't have to discuss it so much. That is something that why this is probably going on in so many nations at the moment, in combination with the funding. And then if we don't do anything, and which is something that many of the developing countries are likely to do, that they will continue with the old methods that they have, and they will have very little control on the outcome of what will be done with the molecular tool standardization or method uptake. And then even if they do take up something, then there is a risk of an incompatible solution that they have chosen to do, which is no longer compatible, but then will be state of the art in other countries. So that's a bit too high risk for them. And it may also lead to a very high investment cost when in actuality the implementation starts, unless you can really leapfrog it, like say with the cell phones in some parts of Africa. It also might encounter a lot of pushback from stakeholders, which is normal with new methods, even in developed countries. So that's a very common thing. But there is no direct initial cost, which is great, and no work effort involved. So my recommendations, which are a bit a mixture of many of the aspects, are that for these methods that hold a big promise for biodiversity assessments and monitoring, we need to get together on a global scale and really inclusively and talk to each other and forge out standards, because these will be the key to ensure that these methods A, get taken up, and B, are comparable to each other, and will create the data that we will need in order to make the good assessments. And we need to be very quick about this, else we risk that on a national scale, these will be implemented and we will end up with several incompatible solutions that are not really comparable, and we will spend years and years in battles and fights to deduce that in the end we should have talked earlier to one another, and not really at the point where we were trying to make circles and triangles go in the right sort of make them comparable. But if you're really interested in these and these discussions, then please join us in the discussion on the 29th of September, where we will where I will convene a session on this, and perhaps you want to join us, and feel free to tweet about this and be open and share this knowledge about this session. Thank you, and thank you for the invitation, Declan, for that.
Thank you, Kristian. Profound as always. And I look forward to your event on the 29th. Really, I know. Please look online. He's put a lot of work in. He's been working on this since November. We had discussions on this in.
Well, Declan, that sounds like I'm not very efficient in what I'm doing.
No, tremendously efficient. No, a little effort over a long time equals success. No, really. So
okay.
I know Juan Miguel wants to come in.
Kristian, first of all, congratulations for your work, because I can make an intuition very of that effort. I will tell you something related to this, more or less, and forgive me if I'm not right. We are collaborating for LifeWatch now with our another sister research infrastructure recently established. It's going to be an ERIC. It's MIRRI, Microbial Biodiversity Research Infrastructure. So microbial biodiversity.
Okay.
It's going to be hosted by Portugal, the Republic of Portugal, from Braga, Região Porto Norte. We're establishing a very interesting cooperations in relation to supercomputing and cloud computing, blockchain, etc. for these identifications. Sure. And there is a very interesting issue I was reading about the last days. It's about the anthropological, the remains of some areas in order to reveal the history of the biodiversity throughout the entire history. Then in Finland. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking maybe you were behind, I think so. I saw you in a TV. I was very interested how you, with this analysis, you are reconstructing all the historical biodiversity of a territory, depending on the age, no? Throughout all the countries, how analyze them and the implications, for instance, with the migratory movement of the people. It's amazing. So I congratulate you. And I'm telling this about MIRRI because maybe we can find a way to collaborate to have those synergies. In the case of demanding, you have now the biggest supercomputing there as well in Finland. I've been there in the launch in Finland. Christos can confirm that we are very active in the biodiversity digital twin. And in some way of that biodiversity digital twin, we could miss the essential microbial biodiversity and eDNA characterization of those microbial that is supposed to be done by you and MIRRI. So let's check how we come from the technical perspective. Can we collaborate on this?
Yeah, our work in BioDT is specifically, we hired a microbial scientist to work on this for the BioDT. So so this is gaining momentum. It's fun.
It's fun, and they are leaders on that. And they're looking up for the historical issues, implications, for example, how the agri-food, the crops, these multi-crops are evolving to monocrops, and that is a disaster. And how this is the implication for pollinators. And it's amazing how you can find for the eDNA not only a canonical shape of how many species are, but also the implications and the connections of the environment. No?
Absolutely. I've been given strict instructions by Ketty to conclude the proceedings, because otherwise Mayela will whatever. So no, in all seriousness, this is a process. This is a process. This does not end now. I keep repeating that because I mean it, and it is important that we need to understand that. So listen, thanks to everybody who contributed to this process today. Many wonderful, fine speakers, individuals, and we look forward to more. And please join us for other meetings next week and the week after. But in particular, let's keep our focus going forward. Kristian's meeting is on the 29th. So we stay in touch, and we look forward to the outputs that our dear friend Jose M will produce for us. So he's providing the adult supervision today, and he'll give us our instructions. So we look forward to seeing that very soon. So all I can say is thank you and congratulations on a really wonderful discussion. So that's it. Over and out. Okay.
Thank
From
you.
New York. Thank you.